Welcome, everyone. You are joining us for Counseling Strategies for Housing Choice Voucher Home Ownership Program clients. We have a great panel lined up today, and we're really excited to share this with you. I'm going to quickly go over CVent. I'm sure many of you are becoming pros by now, but remember, you can access the schedule, you can explore speakers and their profiles, interact with attendees. While you're in this session, feel free to use the live Q&A. We have a Q&A part of the program, so you can get your questions answered live, connect with partners, and remember, there's gamification, so the more you interact and do things in the platform, the more likely you are to maybe be a winner. I am going to flip this over to Shauna, and we're going to do a quick Mentimeter question. So Shauna, take it away.
Thank you so much, Emily, and welcome everyone. We really appreciate everyone who's been engaging with us on the CVent platform and the community board related to this topic. So we just thought we'd get started here. And again, I'm Shauna Marai, I work at ICF, and we are HUD's partner, and we're a technical assistance provider. And it's so great to be back with so many of you. So let's find out how many of you are counseling clients through the Housing Choice Voucher homeownership option. So, and it's okay if you are unsure, and some people know exactly like who they've been serving in their program related to Housing Choice Voucher. So let us know, yes, no, unsure. And so far, there's so many of you who have said yes. A few that have said no, and I know that because of the community board, many of you are asking there, like, how do you do this? And can't wait to hear from our panelists on what their secret sauce is, what they can learn from them. So that's what I'm seeing so far is many of you are yeses and could probably add to the discussion. So please do in the community board, and a few that are saying no. So we'll just keep that open on your side of things, Emily, but we will transition to the PowerPoint. And we are so pleased to be with so many experts here and also an amazing national partner. So the first person who's going to tell us all things on the Housing Choice Voucher homeownership option from where he sits is Bruce Dorpalen. He's the executive director of the National Housing Resource Center, amazing advocacy, association-based, lots of housing counseling agencies are members of NHRC. Then he's going to turn to Megan Ryan, who's the director of homeownership and mobility grant programs at the Boston Housing Authority. And Megan and her team have gotten a lot of national press around how in the world are you doing this in Boston, and what makes that program work well. She's been picked up in many different places across the country and different media. And then finally, Ron Izzo just happens to also be close by to Boston, but managing his program in New Hampshire at New Hampshire Housing. He's a supervisor in rental assistance and family self-sufficiency and operates a network of housing counseling agencies as a state HFA. And then here I am at the bottom here. So what we'd love to do is have Bruce Dorpalen talk to us about a national perspective, kind of what's going on in Housing Choice Voucher for homeownership, and then take a deeper dive with our two panelists from Boston and their first time home program, and then New Hampshire Housing's voucher assisted mortgage option. We will have a discussion as a group because we talked about, again, what are some lessons learned that we can impart that might help other housing counseling agencies serve this particular client base. And then we will have you ask us questions during the question and answer. And we also have a resource slide as well that we thought would be helpful to share. So it is my pleasure to turn it over to Bruce Dorpalen at the National Housing Resource Center. Bruce.
Thanks so much, Shauna and HUD team. I'm very glad to be here. It's an important topic. And I'm going to touch on some of the basics. So Section 8 housing choice vouchers are well known for rental, for subsidizing rental payments. The important and exciting thing is that same voucher payment can be used on the mortgage payment. So we can reduce the amount of the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, the PITI, that's due. And it's limited to people who are Section 8 homeownership voucher, rental voucher holders. And that means people who make less than 50% of median income. And that's it's very, very low income, but it makes it sustainable because the payments are very affordable. And we'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. But it's an important opportunity. So that makes very low income homeownership sustainable and affordable. It requires high quality counseling and down payment assistance to help people get in, but it's really hitting a badly underserved population, so low income people, of course, but also 61% of the vouchers in this country are voucher holders are Black or Latino. And it's a tremendous wealth building tool. So these people will be homeowners, they will build equity, and they will have intergenerational wealth that can be passed on to others. It's very, very exciting. The challenge here is that we need to make this program work, and that means scaling it up substantially. And we think that's what the role is that housing counselors can play in working with their local PHAs and lenders to make it work. The National Housing Resource Center has been working with HUD and many of you to improve the program. We have a working committee of 50 plus organizations that are deeply involved in working to improve the program in lots of different ways. We'll continue doing that work, but we think that really the place on the ground to make this all work is really with the local PHAs. So really, you're the next step in all this. So let's stay on the slide we just had. So currently, there's less than 10,000 vouchers that are homeownership vouchers out of 2.3 million. So we're talking here about less than 0.5%. Even if we got it up to 5%, we'd have 120,000 homeowners who would be very low income getting subsidized voucher homeownership. It could be a real game changer out there. And there's over 600 PHAs that currently do the program. HUD is some incentives to get others to join, and if they do it in the calendar year, they'll get a little bit of incentive to join. So reach out to your PHA if you're interested in the program to make it work. We'll talk about that, and we'll be hearing from a couple leading PHAs who are doing this work already. Chicago and Philadelphia are leaders in the homeownership voucher field. We're almost 400. There used to be 400 and each they had in vouchers, but this is a good example of the kind of volumes that we should normally see, and hopefully they will grow their program as well under this. This is a resource page that HUD has, and the links are in the resource slide that's going to come up soon. The thing is, if you want to know if your PHA is active in the program, just click where it says PHA code up there in the data section, and it'll sort by state, and you can then look and see which PHAs in your state are offering the program currently. But again, remind you that it's not that difficult for PHAs to join the program if they're not doing it currently. We also have a 2.5-hour training program that we did this summer. I hope over 600 of you participated in that. And it's recorded and on our website and on the resources, but it goes through housing counseling agencies, lenders, housing authorities, and HUD, all talking about how to make the program work. So it's a much deeper dive, and it's available to you at any time. So just some of the basics that you know is that the people who already have Section 8 vouchers are the only ones who are eligible. So I'm sorry, I know you'll have people who seem perfect for the program, but it absolutely has to be somebody who currently has a voucher and can be transferred then to homeownership. In most cases, the homeowner will only pay 30% of their income, which makes it very sustainable. With some PHAs, it will they'll allow you to go a little bit higher to make sure they can actually afford the property, but it's 30% is really the target. The subsidy itself is based on the fair market rents and family size. And that's the way the rental voucher works. And it's the exact same amounts for the homeownership side of the fence. You can find out what the voucher amount is in your community. It's called the payment standard, and you can get it from the PHA. It's public information. It's possibly on their website, but they will give it to you, and that will allow you to counsel them and figure out affordability based on that voucher amount. The subsidy, the way it works is that the homeowner would pay 30% of their household income, and the subsidy would cover the rest of the PITI. And it is like any other affordability question. If the subsidy and the homeowner's income are not enough to pay for PITI, then they don't qualify. But the nice thing about the program is that rents have been going up, so that even though housing costs have gone up in the mortgage side, then affordability is actually we're finding that it's tracking more than we were worried it wouldn't. The key program to your success with the program is to market to voucher recipients, and that's and let's move to the next slide here. We're finding that if the Housing Counseling Agency becomes involved directly with the PHA and has a great marketing program that really involves education and helps people understand how the program works and what's involved with them, maybe it includes some people who already have qualified for a Section 8 home ownership. That kind of program is highly effective. And what we hear a lot is voucher holders who aren't told about the program or aren't aware of it. And that's something that you can solve working with your local PHA. The subsidy is for, it has some limitations to it currently, that if you are getting a mortgage for 20 years or longer, the term of the subsidy itself is 15 years. Unless they're elderly or disabled, and then it's for the life. But for the Section 8 person that doesn't fit under that category, they have a 15-year term, and we call it a financial cliff that comes at the end. There's ways to resolve that, and we can help you with that in situations people are in. But many people have already incomed out of the program and are able to move on. All of that's doable. The good news also is that we've been talking with HUD about this problem, and they are now ready to propose a rule change that would match the subsidy for the life of the loan. And that's not in place today, unfortunately, but hopefully in the future that'll be able to happen. There's lots of programs to help support people in this process, one of which is the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, which allows people to save for home ownership. It's a valuable program if your PHA offers it, and you should become familiar with it. And that will give people both tools to be more flexible. When we first used to work in this program, one of the problems was having lenders who actually did those loans. We have made a lot of progress. We've done a lot of training and preparation for lenders around the country. If you're having a problem, please let us know. We are happy to help try to connect you with lenders who are willing to do the program, and we can help you with understanding the underwriting as well. The resources will be in the next slide, and then we're going to move on to Meg and Ryan from the Boston Housing Authority to talk about what one of the programs looks like.
Thank you, Bruce. Now that you have a great overview of how the HCV to home ownership kind of program requirement structure works, we're going to talk a little bit more about how do we actually do this in the day-to-day work as a housing authority. I'm going to begin with an overview of the BHA on the next slide, just to give you a profile of our size. So the BHA, we serve over 58,000 residents. We manage 10,000 public housing units and over 16,000 vouchers. We are the largest housing provider in the city of Boston, housing 9% of the population, and we are the 6th largest housing authority in the nation. So a lot of people, right? We service a lot of tenants. We are a high cost area. Right now, the Boston real estate market median home price is close to $1 million. So given those challenges, we at the BHA have really had to explore, additional resources to combine that with the HCV to homeownership in order to make homeownership still a possibility for our lower income residents. So back in 2022, we are about to have our 2nd year anniversary of launching our BHA First Home program. That's kind of our umbrella term, the overall program name for anything homeownership related at the BHA. Part of this kind of rebranding and officially launching a homeownership department at the BHA was due to funding for down payment assistance that the City of Boston, the Mayor's Office of Housing through Mayor Wu's Welcome Home Initiative, where they designated ARPA funds to provide additional funding for our tenants that purchase homes within the City of Boston. So that is kind of what was the catalyst for really looking at, we can still make homeownership happen in this high cost city. And one of our partners in this work is the Massachusetts Affordable Housing, MAHA, which provides housing counseling. They also provide match savings and additional counseling for first generation home buyers. So we work very closely with them. Most of our buyers complete their first time home buying courses through MAHA and also receive individualized counseling from them as well. So there's 2 kind of main components to our homeownership program at the BHA. The newest benefit we have is the down payment assistance provided through the City of Boston. So our tenants that do end up buying a home located within the Boston city limits receive $75,000 in upfront cost assistance towards the purchase of that home. And that can be split between down payment, closing costs, and interest rate buy down. And then our kind of primary program here is using their vouchers, so the HCV to home ownership. It's been an option from HUD since year 2000, but of course, it's not like the easiest program to administer, but many authorities do administer the program. We have been able to kind of revitalize the program that due to the funding from the City of Boston. So right now, majority of our tenants, the 16,000 voucher holders, right, any of them could inquire about the program. In the little under 2 years since we've launched the BHA First Home program, we have 58 of our tenants purchase their first home in less than 2 years. And 47 of those utilize their voucher as well. So majority of our lower income households, right, they need all of the different benefits combined in order to purchase a home. One of the really helpful tools that we develop, which a lot of housing authorities may also have for their rental side, is using an affordability calculator. So we have this for the rental side to see, like, is the rent reasonable, etc. So we adapted this and made a version for our home ownership side. And so most of the time, given that's a high cost area, generally people would get, receive up to the estimated maximum HAP. But every now and then, if somebody purchases like a lower cost area or a lottery unit, affordable unit, there's 2 ways to calculate the HAP, which includes either the lower figure of the payment standard or the cost of the unit, subtracting from their 30% income. So this tool, the lenders can use this, the client can use this. This is a public tool. It's on our website. The simple way to kind of begin to use this is you put in the zip code for where the home is that you're interested in looking, or maybe have a home you're already seeing on MLS listing, etc. So you put in the zip code, the voucher size of that household, the monthly adjusted income, which we provide a voucher letter that the lender can identify that figure. And then generally, if you're just starting the process, there isn't a property identified yet. So what this tool is telling the lender or the home buyer is it's automatically looking up the payment standard for you. You could also refer to our Excel chart of the 250 towns that we cover in our jurisdiction. But this is a very easy way. You put in the zip code of the neighborhood, you put in your voucher size and your adjusted income, and therefore you get this estimated maximum HAP. So this saves us a lot of administrative time. a lot of the process, generally default process, is you have to find somebody from the housing authority or your leasing officer to try to figure out what your HAP would be for home ownership, and then send that to the lender and back and forth. And it can cause a lot of delays and just a lot of administrative processes. So this calculator is instantaneous. Anybody can use it. Once there is a property identifier, on the right-hand column, you can see the kind of property specific figures that you will plug in. And generally those numbers are going to come from the lender that you're working with. And this will give you a pretty accurate figure of, for that property sale, this is what your estimated HAP would be. So this tool saves us a lot of time. It allows everybody to make sure they get access to information. Now I'm going to review some of the other key areas that we've been able to implement in our program to really make it successful. The biggest thing is having staffing. And so we now have a full-time homeownership team dedicated to just answering and helping everybody through their homeownership process. When I came on board, I formalized more of a process in building out relationships with lenders and realtors. This is not like an easy thing for any housing authority to do necessarily. And this is something we do advocate to HUD of, like, how can we get more support? Could HUD do a bit more work in like building out trainings and infrastructure to help lenders and realtors understand how to actually do the homeownership process through the voucher? So that's another key piece, is bringing on lenders, training realtors how to actually do this work with us. And then, of course, seeking additional financial resources outside of our agency. So the city provides funding. Previously, we had state funding as well that also provided an additional down payment assistance. That fund, we're waiting for it to be renewed right now. And then lastly, really improving our customer service and making sure that we have client-facing information that they can access. So on our website, any of our tenants can find our homeownership webpage, and it has all the information spelled out. We also have a step-by-step guide that has probably over 100 questions, FAQs. And so this is also a public link that anybody can look at and review, and explains pretty much everything to them. When they have questions like, what's the difference between my family size versus voucher size? How much will my subsidy be for here, etc. So we really wanted to make sure that tenants are not, there isn't barriers to information. And so that's another key piece that we've really improved in the programming since we launched this program. I think that is my last slide. And now I will turn it over to Ron Izzo, the supervisor of rental assistance and family self-sufficiency at the New Hampshire Housing. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Megan. And thank you, Bruce. Yeah, so what we do in New Hampshire, we do home ownership. We also do family self-sufficiency. We do the home ownership counseling piece, and we also administer the mortgage voucher. We also are the intermediary for the housing counseling grant, and and that's for 3 to 4 other agencies around the state. So they don't have to do the grant. We do it. We oversee their programs, and it just makes it more efficient and I don't know, better outreach throughout the state. So what we do is basically we call it the VAMO program. It's a voucher, Homeownership Choice Voucher Assisted Mortgage Option. And there's certain criteria, like Bruce and Megan was saying. You have to be a certain age to qualify for the 15 years or the lifetime, and employment is waived. But you all have to have banking and credit. Everybody has to have that. So next slide, please. So basically what we do is we educate our regional lenders. We have a program called the Leadership Academy, Fellowship Academy, another word for it. And it's a 9-month program. And they go through, they go to DC and they learn all the things about HUD, about housing and economic development, housing politics, they get a national perspective. They visit the State House there in Concord. So like I said, it's a 9-month class that they're connected with. And anybody, real estate agents, lenders, anybody dealing with this can do that. And they get a nice certificate, and it helps their careers. but that's where we educate them on our programs. VAMO's the #1 thing. When clients do this, they have two options. Their voucher payment can be added to the borrower's to their qualifying income, or the payment is used to reduce their PITI payment. And so that's up to the lenders how they want to negotiate that. It's always affordable fixed rate mortgages, government and conventionally insured, VA loans, all that stuff. Down payment assistance programs, we have them all the time. Currently, we got 2 or 3, and they can be combined. And in this case, you could see we can offer up to 20 grand combined. And I think there might even be a $7,500 one that can be offered in certain circumstances. We reduce the mortgage insurance on the conventional mortgages. And we also offer rehabilitation mortgage options, like once they're in, you know, they may not be able to afford to fix their roof or their furnace because remember, they may not be working. We're talking about elderly and disabled now who don't have to work, but they have to have a certain amount of income. That income doesn't help with the maintenance of a home all the time. So we may have to roll in there and offer grants and loans. And we do that quite often. Next slide. So in our process of counseling, the client completes work plans, and all of those are focused on certain areas of the process, like the budgeting and credit. Very important to get their credit to a certain point so they can qualify for a good rate. So we do their credit score. We do an analysis on their credit scores and their credit reports. It's all free for them. And then we get into the homeownership education piece, where we just talk about what it takes to be a homeowner, the upkeep, walking around that home and looking at the life cycle rates. You know, how old is my refrigerator? How old is my dishwasher? When am I going to need to replace this? And then number 3, which not all homeowners do, or none of them do actually, except for the subsidy folks. We talk about how the subsidy works for the VAMO part of it. What we do is we include a letter. It's kind of a commitment. It's a estimate, and it tells them what their subsidy based on their income and household makeup is going to be in any part of New Hampshire. If it's somewhere in Manchester, then we still give them the counseling. But if it's in Manchester's jurisdiction, then the Manchester Housing Redevelopment, they take over and they manage the voucher. But if some housing authority does or can't manage that voucher, we'll do it. We'll port them into us, and we'll do that for them. And then the last part is the closing process, which and we do this all over the phone. We're currently creating short little videos, so when we're not around, they can click on these things and say, "Oh, let me review this again before I close on the home," or start looking again. Because by the time they get their mortgage subsidy letter and then they find a home, it could be months or years, especially with the current market and the supply. And as you can see here, we've served over 350 plus to date. 75 plus right now have mortgage subsidy letters and they're shopping, but the supply in New Hampshire has gone down. So we're dealing with that. Anyway, next slide, please. That's all I have. Anything? Moving on, Shauna.
Thank you so much. I think it was really helpful to hear from Megan about what she is able to accomplish in Boston over the last couple of years, and then also you, Ron, in terms of how you're operating your network of housing counseling agencies. We thought there have been so many excellent questions, and I think some of what folks would like to know we can touch on here in terms of what makes for a successful HCV homeownership option like program. So, and these are the things that HUD provides as, you know, ways to succeed, but we thought we, you know, take each of these and kind of break it down a little bit further. So the 4 elements covered here, the first one is bankable program participants. They have to be eligible to participate and being bankable and the underwriting associated with that. Thought, Ron, you could just touch on that a little bit more. And we would love to hear you, Ron. We absolutely would love to hear.
Sorry about that. We offer a lot of programs. You know, it's our mortgage products, basically. So if they, you know, use one of our mortgage products, we're going to give them incentives, down payment incentives. And that's basically it in a nutshell.
Megan, anything you want to add to that from your own experience?
Apologies, we had a notification go off. We're still on the bankable program, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, you know, as a housing authority, in wanting to make the program successful, right, we are dependent on lenders at the end of the day, right? It's the mortgage. And so part of this work is really making sure that we have our program requirements in our application, but we do have resources that inform interested tenants, even if they are not bankable right now. Here are the resources of how to improve your credit, build your credit. For example, joining our FSS program. Here's a link to that. So that's one of the key areas we wanted to make sure is accessible, is that anybody who's interested, even if they're not mortgage ready today or homeownership ready right now, that they're getting the resources to get on that path. And so that's a lot of resources we list on our webpage as well. So if they try to apply, it screens for it. And then it tells them, here's a recommendation of how you can, you know, here's financial coaching classes, here's where you can get these resources, so that they're not left with like, well, what do I do now? And so that's one area we address that.
Yeah, and then just to round this out a little bit before we move on to the next one is obviously, you know, making sure that, like you said, that that they have, if they have any credit issues, that those are addressed, obviously some sufficient income, and, you know, folks that are ready through a family self-sufficiency program, which is something that like Ron, his is directed through that. So all those, you know, all those components just help make a participant bankable and kind of ready to take this on as the next step. And I also just kind of want to weave in that, and I really appreciate Gabriella Roman, who's in HUD's Office of Housing Counseling in Chicago. She mentioned the Chicago Housing Authority. They actually have a program called Choose to Own and have provided all of their requirements, just like you have, Megan, like on their website. So those that are participating in their program as a Housing Choice Voucher holder, it's for that participant to go look at all the requirements that they personally, as members of their household, like need to do to exercise this option. So I think that Chicago, while they are also not a housing counseling agency, we know they also partner, just like you do, Megan, across the entire region to make sure that they have that in place and work collectively with that housing counseling agency. I know, you know, affordable units is something that we also discussed planning for this session, but also I failed to say the Boston regional meeting is the place where we all got together initially, and there will be regional meetings coming to more locations in 2025. There will be a session tomorrow that we will discuss those places and also where we've been. But in Boston, it kept coming up, and I know that we're preaching to the choir in terms of just making sure that there's enough affordable units, and there's a supply issue. It's across the country, but it's also something that you all have experienced in Boston and also in New England. So in terms of adding to the supply of affordable units, and I believe, Megan, you had a couple things to add to this, but anyone can also speak up. But anything in particular you want to note that's going on in your region to add to the number of affordable units?
Yeah, I can add a few of the strategies that we have implemented. One of the things we noticed with the affordable or lottery, some of the lottery units, their applications for a long time really didn't account for the voucher counting as income. And that was brought to our attention from tenants. that they would try to apply for lottery units, and it said, well, you don't meet the income, but it didn't allow them to select that they had a voucher. So from the policy side, we worked through that and cleaned that up and made sure that those who do the marketing agencies with the developers, et cetera, that was made sure that voucher buyers are eligible. And then the other piece that we worked on is partnering with developers to discuss ways that they could build in an inclusion plan, and with the city as well, where I think it's not effective just yet, but the policy will change where they're trying to designate, I think, 3% of units to voucher buyers, kind of right of first refusal. So those are some of the areas that we also address and try to work directly to make sure that more developers understand about HCV, how that works, and how we have a lot of tenants are seeking to buy homes, but especially those that are on very fixed incomes, veterans, et cetera. Their income may never get to a level where they can ever buy market rate. And so this is a critical pathway for homeownership for those who senior, elderly, et cetera, to be able to have an affordable unit. And so those are some of the ways that we've really built out more partnerships.
And not everyone is, unfortunately, has the ability to kind of plug in, like you just mentioned, to your inclusionary housing that's happening in terms of Boston, to adding to your stock. But I think that's an excellent idea of adding to, if you do have an exclusionary housing policy or ordinance in your jurisdiction, is to piggyback on that. I love that. I also was.
Let me just jump in on this whole
Yes.
question, qualifying and income, because Megan put in a very good point. With lenders, partly the issue is the same problem, which is how do you value the value of the voucher? And if it's treated as one more source of income coming into the household, it's then it means that there's a little bit more money available to help buy. But the better strategy is to treat it as what's called an offset, which means you take PITI on the property that you're trying to buy and you subtract it directly from that, and only qualify people on the amount that they're actually paying. On the income amount, if it's treated as income, what happens is money goes to the household, it becomes one more source, but they have to qualify for the entire PITI, and essentially it's harder to get to affordability on that question. And I mean, there's a little bit more detail on that. The payment needs to go directly to the lender, not to the household. FHA loans do this, portfolio lenders do this. But that's a set of options that we should be looking at. The other thing that it's really worth doing, which is kind of underscoring what Megan was saying, was this really building relationship with nonprofit and for-profit, mission-driven developers who have an opportunity here. We've had really excellent conversations with Habitat for Humanity, which is available around the country. Those are all really good matches for this program.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And thanks for piggybacking a little bit. That was also something that Gabriella mentioned too, is what she's seen in Chicago is just partnerships across the board, Bruce, are really important to help those that are going to help your clients best. The only other thing I was going to mention too is that since you brought up the payment standard, Bruce, and they can find the payment standard for all of their housing authorities, at least that's a starting place to look at also like what's affordable to these clients when you start having the discussion. And because housing counselors know what they need to look at in terms of underwriting for that particular household, the affordability, what's available in the marketplace. So there are some steps that you can take as an HCA to look at what is going on in my community and what the housing authority is putting out there in terms of their program. I wondered if I could turn for a second to Ron to cover the lenders. I know you mentioned talking to the lenders and working through the lender community, but I think that you have done an extensive job doing that. So maybe talk a little bit about your lender relationships and just touch on a few more points than earlier.
Sure. So like I said, they keep in touch. They just, everything we have, every program, every incentive, every HUD program that could affect lenders, it's just constant communication. Like I said, every year they have a fellowship program and lenders are there. There's also, I know we do it like a contest on who serves the most clients, not necessarily all VAMO, but who does the most New Hampshire housing mortgages. So we have a contest there and we have who did the best. We wine and dine them. It's a lot of that, yeah, it's just that basic stuff. And to get them used to and comfortable with doing our mortgages and doing our VAMO mortgages. So that's it. Again, it's just the relationships.
The relationships and celebrating, obviously, like the
Yeah.
partnership and also their own successes. I like the idea of rewarding lenders that, you know, work in your
Right.
across your mortgage products, Ron. Not everyone can do that, but as
Right.
DHA certainly can.
Yeah.
So essentially it's pulling all of this together. So I would just add before we move on to the Q&A, is that really not just about the relationships, but also if you want to serve this client base, and it sounds like there are many folks that do from the community boards, but also from the Q&A, they just need to figure out how to get it started. We have a bunch of resources in the end, and it includes sort of this playbook for Housing Choice Voucher home ownership that touches on all of this and provides a lot of great tips. And what a homeowner's responsibilities are, things like that. Some of the rudimentary questions that we got are on the mechanics of the program, but definitely recommend that you take a look at that. So let's move on to the Q&A. And let me just pull up a couple that I noticed and thought that we would, we got a few more. Like I said, lots of interest in this. So, you know, maybe, Megan, I don't know how things got started for you, but there was a lot of questions around how to engage the housing authority. We mentioned there are things available on their websites, like the payment standard and the programs that they offer. And then Bruce also showed this lookup tool. But how can, you know, housing counseling agencies approach housing counseling, or sorry, approach their housing authority? Anybody can take this question, but I thought I'd start with Megan.
Yeah, you know, as housing counselors are speaking to tenants, you know, and sometimes the contact information, the PHA may or may not be super updated, but I would encourage to reach out still and get someone from that housing authority that the tenant is part of or interested in. We have a lot of requests for those that want to pour into ours because, of course, who doesn't want our benefits? But it's like we can't really actually like all the time just like switch everybody to the BHA. But we do have a process for that. If you want to port, you know, we inform them that priority is always going to go to our current tenants first for home ownership. But as you're counseling them, establishing those relationships with your local PHA, it may take a couple of tries. But if you find that information, starting that communication in CCing the email of like, here's a client I'm counseling, they're interested in this, can you help us? And just get the conversation going. But that's how we get a lot of our leads. And you know, anytime somebody's interested, it might have been like they're like veteran support or something in the VA office that they're working with tenant, and then they reach out to me. So really bringing everyone together and just starting that conversation so that more information gets out there to hopefully even more and more people understand how it all works. But I would encourage, like, it's kind of like cold calling, cold emailing, but that's what I do too when I'm building out those relationships. So don't hesitate to, if you may not get through to somebody in the main customer service line, keep at it. And eventually, you know, I do think housing authorities, from what I've assessed, are all interested and want to be able to provide this option. They are also still seeking support of how they can do it as well. So I think the desire is there from housing authorities from the conversations I've had, and I'm trying to support them, but keep up and just keep trying to build that relationship.
Let me just add a couple things to that. So I completely agree. I will point out that some housing authorities say, well, we don't have the staff for it. We just don't have the capacity. We don't have the administrative funds. And what Ron has done in New Hampshire is they've got a statewide program that can fill the gaps for the ones that don't have the capacity. Michigan's done that. New York has a similar thing. I know that New Jersey's really thinking about that. And we can help you figure that piece out if that's an issue. The other thing is how to approach a PHA, and PHAs, they have a lot of work to do. And so it is sometimes hard to just ring them up and chat with somebody, but they're political players who will help you get in. So state legislators and city council members are another way to try to go in. And also in some cases, we can be helpful too.
Yeah. And I think that, I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Ron, and I'm going to touch on what Bruce said too.
And I think that's the crux of the problem is you've got rental assistance managers that know the rental part of it. The home ownership piece is a little bit more complicated because they work for me. And we just went to a new system to manage the clients, and it's clunky. So I could see where the hesitation is out there that they don't want to learn something new. Plus you've got audit risk. I could see that, but it's possible. We've been doing it for 20 years and we're fine. So
I would also just add, and this is one reason why Jimmy Stewart from the Chicago Housing Authority came to our regional meeting in Chicago, was he was looking for partners. He was looking for housing counseling agencies that can work with him on his program, Choose to Own. So, so getting in there, he came to the housing counseling environment, but I would also say the opposite. So just like NHRC exists, there are other associations of housing authorities. So NARO is one, the National Affordable Housing Redevelopment Authorities, and also the Council of Large Public Housing Authorities as well, CLAFA. So there are meetings that they have and there are groups that they have, and getting into their space and trying to find partners. And some states also have like housing associations, so that may bring in different partners. Always encourage folks to tap into what's already existing meetings, relationships, things that you can go to as housing counseling agencies. So, all right, great.
I'll share one other quick resource. So the BHA, along with my local agencies that I speak with a lot, we've been advocating last year for some updated policies and support from HUD. And one of the proposals we gave was having a reoccurring homeownership discussion with HUD. So that anybody can attend those sessions just quarterly. So now there is an actual quarterly meeting to talk about the homeownership option. So we're still in the infancy of really having HUD work with us to say, hey, this has been around, the option's been around for 24 years, but we haven't had designated collaborative efforts. But on the website, which went back to the data numbers, I think that Bruce has shown, it shows there the HCV homeownership committee, and you can sign up and get on the listserv and contribute to that conversation.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yes. Okay, so I would also, a couple folks asking about serving folks with disabilities as well. So I just didn't know if anybody had experience, Ron, Megan, with serving somebody who is disabled and touching on that briefly.
Yeah, I can go first. Yeah, we serve disabled and elderly. The challenge is they've got to find an accessible unit. So that's sometimes tough. But we do. I mean, it's like I said, the only issue is that the income requirements aren't there for them. So if they're making the minimum to qualify and they qualify for the loan, they don't have a lot of money to keep that home maintained. So we watch them. But yeah, disabled, integrated right in our program.
And this is definitely a tougher demographic to provide all the adequate support. Some of the things that, we educate and coach them to make sure that they understand, of course, homeownership requires a lot more obligations. We help them explore additional funding and resources and make sure they're aware of those affordable units. If their mortgage pre-approval is really just going to be fixed around that number, even with the voucher. But we're not by any means denying them, or because sure, they're exempt from the minimum income requirement, things like that. We have an additional minimum income requirement on top of the federal one. But of course, we understand we make all the exceptions we can, and we support everybody who's interested. And a lot of times they may come down to, hey, maybe today, credit and things. How can you continue to work towards improving and increasing your financial goals? And so if they're not in FSS, and they're eligible, they should be in that. It's another way to grow assets. So additional counseling, I would say, that we provide and make sure they're aware of all the resources that they're eligible for.
Okay, thanks for that. I think that would be really helpful to those in the audience who asked the question. I wondered if we could touch on, this was also asked a couple times by the audience, is HUD's proposed rule to extend the subsidy from 15 to 30 years. I know that was in Bruce's part of the presentation. Do you want to start, Bruce?
Well, yeah, I mean, they've said that they want to do it. Nothing's been done in the register. It takes time once it's done, so we don't even know what the exact wording is. We have been talking with HUD about what we'd like to see in it, but it hasn't hit the register yet, and that's the first step towards doing a rule change. There's another issue that people should be aware of, which is that it's that the subsidy, the program, limits what properties you can use. So single family housing, obviously very easy. You can do condominiums, you can do ADUs, but you can't do 2 and 3 unit buildings because of the wording of the legislation. And you actually can't do cooperatives in the same way that you might do with home ownership, because it's all about ownership of the single unit. And cooperatives, that's a share in the building, not the individual unit itself. However, I know in some localities they've worked around that by treating the lease between the cooperative and the homeowner as the unit, and then that's where the subsidy gets covered. But yeah, I mean, we would like to see that as well, and that's one of the things we're working on, is to get a more universal definition of what property is.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bruce. That was actually somebody else's question too, is those multi-unit potential opportunities there. That we've also had kind of, just like other matchmaking that can happen. A lot of folks asked about lenders and finding lenders that can participate in the program. So I know that was one of the successes, is making sure that you've got willing lenders, but how, where can they go? And I said that there's not a national registry for this, but what are some ideas in terms of some lenders that folks could approach? Where would you start?
I mean, actually, we did an orientation for the lenders in the same way that we did for the housing counselors, and had 80 lenders representing about 40 institutions there. You should think about this as something is very interesting to lenders, because you have CRA obligations, you have the special purpose credit program. This is a very neat fit for things that they have to do currently. There's a number of lenders that are doing it and are deeply committed. But we also, it's illegal not to consider Section 8 vouchers as a source of income. It's an ECOA violation. So they have to deal with it in one form or another. But as I said, how they treat it in the underwriting matters of affordability. So if you're in an area where you're having problems, you please let NHRC know, because we are very interested in solving that problem. I'll tell you, one of the things that we have learned about this is that lenders that are actively doing the program, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily doing it everywhere, because you have to train your loan officers, the LOs. And so it's not just that you will do the program, you have to have the LOs doing it. So we've gotten a number of institutions where we can reach out to the senior management and say, okay, we know you do a great job here in Boston and New Hampshire, but we need you in Topeka, Kansas too. So I think those are all issues. The other interesting thing is that some portfolio lenders have more flexibility as well on these kind of loans.
Some of the what? I missed that
Portfolio
word.
lenders. So lenders who lend on their balance sheet, so they don't sell the loan to anybody else. They keep it themselves.
Yeah, all great tips. Bruce, that's really helpful to mention. And because you use an acronym that folks may not be familiar with, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, ECOA is how I call it, is something that in source of income non-discrimination, there was a few folks in the community board brought that up, is that they were having trouble with having the ability to make sure that folks were not discriminated against based upon having a voucher. So that's all something that folks are paying attention to. Anyone else want to comment on lenders and lender relationships? Ron, anything to add? And we would love to hear you, Ron.
I always do that. I'm sorry. It's not necessarily my expertise, but we stay plugged in because, again, having those relationships is incredibly important. And they got to have a heart. You know, we're talking about low income folks here, giving them a shot. You know, again, we do the credit analysis for our clients, so we get them prepared to walk in that lender's office. And like I said, we tell them to go to the lenders. You know, we offer them a list of lenders, and those lenders all know the HCV program. So we hold their hand as much as possible, you know, both lender and clients.
Yeah, your sort of lender consortium lends itself to that too. So
yeah.
And you've built that over. Yeah.
That's the other thing.
Yeah. I've been to your state. I know.
Yeah.
Really appreciate that. Okay. Well, I mean, I just want to thank you all so much. I think this has been a really, I think, helpful discussion to have and real action oriented for the housing counseling agencies out there. So really appreciate everyone's time for this. And we definitely want to point out some resources. So as Bruce mentioned, the National Housing Resource Center, and this is on their main page at the bottom underneath all of the trainings that they offer. They did 2 sessions recently on the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher option and for counselors. We also have VAMO and also their letter that they have for lenders. We put that in here, and then all the things that Megan's organization, the Boston Housing Authority, has on their page as well. So serving them, link to the calculator that she mentioned, all those great resources are there. And then we also thought some national resources would also be really helpful. And I really thought we had our national resources. Well, we will make sure that we share them on the community board, because I know that we need to make sure that is in your hands, that guidebook that I mentioned for HCV, et cetera. But we want you to come back and join us with Tracy Urban of FHEO, Fair Housing Equal Opportunity, and also Lee Lester, who's been doing a lot of training on mental health across many different training NOFO providers. So come back for that session. Make sure you take the pre-assessment. I provided the link on that community board. It's going to be a great session to end our day and to recognize the demands that you folks have as housing counselors in the field and working with your clients. We want to thank you all so much for joining us here today and for doing the work that you're doing. So make sure that you come back for the last session, and we will see you next time. So thank you all so much.